Okay, so my name is Cameron Scott. Today we'll be discussing some of the big protest movements that took place primarily around the 1900s. In that area, there were a lot of different types of movements that affected society in a big way. The first among those we're going to talk about is going to be feminism. Now, feminism is one of those that has the unique thing about this one is that it has many different types, um, many different ways of viewing feminism. You can view it from the black female perspective, which is a more stern approach to feminism. There's the male perspective, which is it's more hands off. The most that people may say males can experience feminism is if they were witnessing the prejudices that were being done onto females and stood up for them. But males don't get the chance to know what it's like to experience those prejudices because they are still male at the end of the day, no matter their beliefs. And then there are lesbian feminism that's going to be they're going to be more in tune with it, probably because they're not only females, but they not only embrace the culture of being a female, but they also embrace the culture of being with other females. So they some may say that they have more of a closer bond with the subject. Shirley Chisholm was one of the people who stated in an article in 1969 that feminism's basically there was a calculated system of prejudice in the workforce when it came to females and working. There was salary caps, limited field positions, and then there was always the thought of what is acceptable for a woman to be, what is unacceptable for a woman to be. Some of the things that she asked us that why is it acceptable for women to be secretaries, librarians, and teachers, but unacceptable for them to be managers, administrators, doctors, lawyers, and members of Congress? Why are the bigger titles not able to be occupied by women? Why do they have to stick to the titles that have to do with serving someone else, that have to do with doing for other people? And that is what she talked a lot about in her article in 1969. Emma Goldman was also a good one. She was an advocate for women's equality. In the Emma Goldman papers by Healy in 1991, it was stated that basically Emma Goldman criticized the automatic enlistment of young men into the military. And for speaking her views, for being so loud about them, she was imprisoned for 2 years. So it's just another form showing that if feminism is one of those where speaking your mind can have serious repercussions. So it's about finding the gap between what is stepping outside of my boundaries and what is speaking my mind. Now, feminism was similar to another movement called civil rights reform. There were national and political efforts to achieve civil rights reform. The primary difference is going to be that women fought for them to be treated with the same respect as men, not to be treated any better, not to be treated any less, but to be treated as equals. Civil rights reform also focused on being treated as equals, but they fought for more than one different kind of person: African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, for them to be treated as the rest of society was. Some of the civil rights reform efforts that were stated in the Kerner Commission in 1968 were ending violence and ending segregation. Some of the recommendations that they made in this particular piece was to implement programs equal to the problem, to close that big gaping hole sitting between promise and performance, what we say we're going to give you and what we're actually going to give you. And then the change in initiatives to improve society. And then the thought of putting an end to segregation would be an effort to gain equality for African Americans. I was stated in the Kerner Commission in 1968. There were also people who were involved in and spoke on civil rights reform. People like Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt. They were against the laissez-faire approach to civil rights reform. They believed the government should have sole control of reform efforts. It was better for the government, basically in their minds, to have some control over reform efforts rather than it to be left completely up to the hands of a few individuals who may or may not be qualified to do so. And this was stated by Jardins in her article. The grassroots African American civil rights. The National Labor Relations Act, or the Wagner Act, has a lot to do with this. That took place in 1945. It gave industrial workers the ability to join trade unions. And this was a big deal because that hadn't been something that was allowed in the past. And it made a huge difference because it gave them another inch of freedom, another inch of I can do this without having to check with this person. It was just another way of improving upon civil rights, and kind of in this subject kind of matches with the civil rights reform efforts. Then, stated by Congress in 1870, large-scale commercial agriculture displaced family farms, tenant farmers, and sharecroppers. And then, of course, we had Imogene Keys and Lena Smith from the Easter Farm Workers Association. They shared their statements as well. This was important because speaking up wasn't it wasn't a big. It didn't happen too often. So when it finally did, this was another form of civil rights reform. Free speech. This was an issue going back to the Emma Goldman papers by Healy in 1991. Speaking her mind got her 2 years of imprisonment. So this was a big difference, and this was a big change for civil rights. So to conclude, all of these movements they had very important and very strong impacts on society in the 1900s, and they still have a place in society today. Feminism still being fought for. Civil rights reform is most definitely still being fought for. It's there are ongoing things that haven't they've been improved upon, but have not been completely and 100% put an end to. The only difference between these movements is that they fought for different things in a different way, but they all fought for equality.